The coal in the hills around my hometown didn't just run out. It vanished, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell of a community. Even before the mountaintops were cleared and the streams turned a sickly, metallic gray, we felt the end coming. Most people fled, chasing a ghost of a better life elsewhere. But those of us left behind were trapped by poverty and tradition. I was one of the unlucky ones. When the mines closed, the town didn't just get quiet, it got dark. People turned to pills and desperation. I heard stories about Randy Cleavewell and his brothers, how they'd lure strangers on the highway only to strip their cars and bury the bodies so deep in the woods that only God would ever find them. Randy invited me to join his crew more than once. But back then, I still had a shred of my soul left. I preferred the quiet hunger of our garden and the small pension my ma received, even if it meant we were barely surviving. The letter and the loss, everything changed on a bitter November morning. I woke up to a house so cold it felt like a tomb. Ma usually had the heater humming and breakfast on the table, but that day, the air was still. I stayed under my blankets, praying the propane hadn't run out, knowing we couldn't afford a refill until next month. But deep down, I already knew. When I pulled back the curtains in her room, Ma was gone. On her nightstand lay a letter from the mining company, insolvency. They were cutting her pension. She was too tired to fight, too old to work, and that letter was her death warrant. At her funeral, the church felt like a hollow ribcage. The Cleavewell brothers nodded at me from the back pew, and for the first time, I looked at my polished black shoes and realized I was ready to do anything to survive. Arova Industries on the drive back from the cemetery, I saw it. A now hiring sign in blood red ink against a white pop-up tent. It was the first sign of work this town had seen in a decade. Inside the tent were two outsiders, Jude and Asa. Clean-cut, smiling, and smelling of expensive city cologne. They represented Arova Industries. The interview felt like a rehearsed play. Their brochures were full of sleek photos but lacked any real detail about what we'd actually be doing. The pay wasn't great, but it was legal. I signed my name, and as I dropped the application into the box, a cold shiver ran down my spine. I had a feeling I hadn't just gotten a job. I had been selected. The portal Monday morning, I reported to the portal, the old mine entrance. What used to be a place of labor now looked like a cancerous growth, with new white structures stretching into the mountainside. The orientation was a joke. Jude explained that some would drill and others would scan the rocks coming out. Scanning for what? I wondered. There was no coal left. But we didn't ask questions, we just cashed the checks. The scanners they gave us looked like supermarket tools but felt heavier, more complex. We worked in silence, wearing our ridiculous blue vests and hard hats, wondering if we were handling radiation or something worse. The first disappearance 3 months in, the luck of the town seemed to turn. People had money again. But then, a scanner beeped for the first time. Connie, a woman on the line, found a rock that triggered the device. Jude came running, his eyes wide with an obsessive hunger. He took the box away and we were all sent home. The next day, Clive, one of the veteran drillers, didn't show up. Asia brushed it off with legal jargon, saying he was fine. But Clive was never seen again. That's when Jude approached me. He wanted me to take Clive's place deep inside the mine. It's in your contract, he reminded me with a thin, sharp smile. I had no choice. Into the deep I went down with Owen, a man whose silence was as heavy as the mountain above us. The further we descended, the stranger the mine became. These weren't standard tunnels. They were just jagged holes in the earth. Owen warned me, "The walls likes to bleed." I thought he was joking until I saw it. A thick, inky liquid oozing from the stone like blood from an open wound. And then there were the sounds. Not the sound of shifting rock, but the sound of something skittering just behind the surface. It sounded like thousands of tiny legs. The chamber of echoes weeks later, our drills punched through into a massive, egg-shaped chamber. It was so vast our headlamps couldn't find the ceiling. We returned to the surface to find a new man in charge, Dr. Atwood. He wore a white lab coat and a plastic smile that didn't reach his eyes. He gave us new, high-tech helmets with cameras and recording gear. He sent Owen down first, alone. We waited for hours, eating stale donuts and drinking lukewarm coffee, while Atwood watched the live feed in a locked room. When the buzzer rang for quitting time, Owen hadn't returned. Atwood told us to go home, but when Connie protested, he whispered something in her ear that turned her face the color of ash. She left without another word. The final descent the next morning, Atwood told me it was my turn. I buckled on the helmet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I walked into the darkness, following Owen's footprints in the thick cave dust. As I reached the center of the chamber, I heard it, a rhythmic, wet sound. I found Owen at the bottom of a slope. His throat was a jagged mess of torn flesh, and he was gasping for air through a pool of his own blood. I leaned in, and with his final breath, he hissed, "The walls? They're inside the walls." He died right there in the dust. The truth in the dark, I realized then that the cameras on my helmet were broadcasting my every move to Atwood. He wasn't trying to save us. He was studying the predator. Suddenly, I heard a jittering sound, the sound of hundreds of legs moving fast. I remembered Owen's headlamp was off. He hadn't lost it. He had turned it off to hide. These things, they hunted by light. I reached for my switch and plunged myself into total, suffocating blackness. I lay flat in the dust, holding my breath until my lungs burned. I felt the air shift as many things, scurried past me, confused by the sudden disappearance of their prey. I realized then that I wasn't a miner. I was bait, and Arova Industries was just getting started.